mercy. The river had been calling him for years, not with a voice, but with the patient language of water, the silver repetition of its body, the soft percussion against the reeds, the way moonlight broke upon its back and gathered itself again. He had heard stories of the waterfall. Some said it fell farther than the eye could follow, that beyond the white curtain, the river plunged into a country where no living thing had returned. Others said there was another world beneath it, a second sky turned upside down where the drowned stars waited with their hands held open. He did not know which story was true. That was the trouble. He did not want to die. He had no great hatred for the earth, no quarrel with the morning, or a wish to abandon the warmth of a bed or the smell of rain upon old stone. He loved too many things. He loved the golden hour when the sun made every window believe it had caught fire. He loved the sudden laughter of strangers and the small conspiracies of friendship. He loved the feeling of being invited into another person's world and finding a chair at the table where he had once wondered if there would be room. He loved, and yet there was the waterfall. So, he built himself a little rowing boat. It was nothing remarkable. 2 oars, a narrow hull, a seat sanded smooth. He pushed it into the river one autumn morning and told himself he would only look. That was all. He would travel far enough to see the water gathering its courage, far enough to watch the horizon disappear beneath the falling white. Then he would turn around. He set off, nearing midday, and the river carried him easily. At first he rowed against it. Every stroke was a question. What lies beyond? What happens when a thing cannot be undone? Does the river die when it falls, or does it simply become something else? He imagined the answer waiting behind the mist. Perhaps there was nothing. Perhaps there was everything. Perhaps the waterfall was merely a magnificent door, and the universe had never promised there would be a handle. By noon, the sound had grown louder. He could hear it beneath the birdsong. A distant thunder, rolling beneath the world. He looked back. The shore was still close enough to touch in his imagination. He could turn. He should turn. Instead, he dipped the oars again. One stroke, then another. The boat moved forward. He began to understand that curiosity was not always a gentle thing. Sometimes it wore the face of wonder and placed a hand upon the shoulder. Sometimes it whispered, just a little closer. So he came closer. The river widened around him, blue and powerful, pulling at the boat with fingers he could not see. The trees along the bank grew smaller behind him. The sky seemed enormous. He stopped rowing. For a moment, he simply listened. The waterfall roared ahead, and he felt something strange inside himself. Not happiness, not despair, but recognition. As though he had spent his whole life standing before a locked door and had finally decided to find out what was on the other side. He picked up the oars and rowed harder. The river had begun to slope and the boat trembled. Mist appeared upon his face like the breath of some enormous creature. He could see the waterfall. Not as a distant rumor anymore, but as a wall of white stretching from earth to sky. The water rushed towards it with terrifying certainty, and suddenly He laughed. Not because he had found beauty hysterical, but because he had finally understood how little the river cared about his questions. The world did not owe him an answer. The waterfall did not exist to satisfy his curiosity. The stars had not been placed above him as clues. And yet, he still rowed. Closer, closer. The boat began to shake. His hands tightened around the oars. He thought of every unfinished sentence, every door he had left open, every person he had loved without knowing what their love meant. He thought of the strange little invitations life sometimes offers. A place at the table, a warm room, a passing smile, a night that became a memory before morning had even arrived. He thought of all the things he had mistaken for promises, when perhaps they had only ever been gifts. The river pulled harder. He stopped rowing. The boat continued. For the first time, fear entered him completely. He looked over his shoulder. The shore was far away. Too far. The waterfall filled the horizon, and beneath the terror, beneath the obsessive need to know, there remained one stubborn little truth. I want to live. He reached for an oar, but it was too late. Then a current dragged him towards a black shape in the river. A jagged rock protruding from the depths. The boat struck it with a sound like a tree splitting in winter. Wood exploded beneath him. The world became awash with water. He was thrown sideways, spinning through cold air and white spray. Then, silence. He'd struck the riverbank. For several moments, he could do nothing but breathe. Mud beneath his fingers, grass against his cheek. His heart hammering like a frightened bird inside a cage. He lifted his head, and there, through the curtain of mist, he saw the remains of his boat. One broken piece, then another. The river gathered them up without malice and carried the wreckage onwards over the edge. He watched the river flowing where it had disappeared, and something inside him broke open. Not his heart, something older. The part of him that had believed every question required an answer. The part that had thought certainty could only be found by walking to the very edge of everything. He began to laugh, then cry. And for the first time, he did not need to know what waited beyond the waterfall. He was alive. That was enough. The river continued its journey without asking for his permission. The water fell, the clouds moved. Somewhere beyond the mist, the world remained mysterious. And he finally understood that mystery was not an insult. It was a mercy. There were things he would never know. There were doors he would never open. There were people he would love who would never become his. There were invitations whose meanings would remain uncertain. There were moments that would end without becoming what he had hoped they might be. And none of that made them worthless. A gift did not become a betrayal because it could not be kept. A goodbye did not erase the hello. A love did not become meaningless because it was not returned in the shape he had imagined. He sat beside the river until the sun began to descend. Gold spilled across the water like a cascade of fire. The same water that had almost carried him away. He placed his palm against the earth and felt its quiet warmth. "Thank you," he whispered. Not to the river, not to the waterfall, but to the rock, to the accident, through a strange, beautiful interruption that had broken his little boat before he could mistake curiosity for his destiny. He looked once more towards the falling water. He no longer questioned it. He no longer needed to conquer it. The waterfall could remain a waterfall. Death could remain death, and life could remain the long, unhurried river between them. He understood then that death was not a door he needed to open. It was a tide. One day, without being summoned, it would come. And when it did, he would not need to row towards it. Until then, there were mornings to meet, fires to light, tables to sit at, hands to hold, roads to wander, and people to love without asking the universe what they owed him in return. So he stood. The river thundered beside him. The wreckage was long gone. And beneath the enormous, indifferent sky, the man walked home, at peace with the knowledge that things will arrive peacefully when the river is ready to deliver them.